Shabbos Daf Nun Beis can be divided into two distinct parts. The first part continues the Gemara's discussion about what type of devices an animal is allowed to wear or carry on Shabbos. The central question is what is functional to lead or control the animal. If it's functional, then it's allowed to carry it. If it's too much or too little, then it's not allowed to carry it. The Gemara will discuss various animals. We're in the middle of discussing camels. We'll also talk about mules, horses, and animals that wear collars like cats and dogs. Then the Gemara will refer to the part of the Mishnah which was discussing tevilah and sprinkling paraduma water in order to purify a animal collar from its tumah. The Gemara would like to know how is it possible that it became tumah in the first place. The Gemara will have a problem with that, and then the Gemara will ask about how it could do tevilah with it if it has a chatzitza, and then the Gemara will have comparisons of different types of rings that become tamei and different types of needles that become tamei, and then that'll take us to the next Mishnah. The Gemara is in the middle of discussing the various different devices that should be used to control various animals. It's important that you use the right device for the right animal on Shabbos, because it's forbidden for an animal to carry on Shabbos, and if it's got the wrong device, then it possibly will be not serving a purpose, in which case it'll be carrying. So we saw that if it is using a device which is not going to accomplish anything, then it's for sure purposeless and it's carrying it. And the question which was in the middle of being discussed is what happens if it's using a device which is too much restraint. It's not necessary to use such a powerful restraint on an animal. On the one hand, it is serving a purpose, it is restraining it. On the other hand, it's not needed so much, so perhaps, therefore, it's still considered a carry. So that is a question the Gemara will get back to in a little bit. For now, the Gemara would like to know what is the proper manner of controlling a goat. So the Gemara has a brisa from the Bei Menashia. Brisa says that the best way to control a goat is to carve holes in its horns and loop the rope through the holes. Why does it have to be like that? Well, a goat has a very narrow head, and if you just put a noose around its neck and try to pull it, it'll fight, and the rope will slide off. So the best thing to do is to have it be stuck in a hole in the horns. So Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef asked, what about if you make a knot in the beard? The goats have long hair on their chin. What if you make a knot in its beard, and you thread the rope through that loop? So then it can't escape. Well, theoretically it could escape. If it really thrashes around, it could pull the beard hair out of the rope, but that'll hurt it. So do we say that it won't escape because it'll hurt it when the beard hairs are pulled out, or do we say that it could still escape, so therefore that's not a good manner of restraining the goat? Now the question here is very important, because if the goat slides out of the rope, so what's going to happen is that the owner will be left holding the rope, and if it's Shabbos and he left holding a rope in the middle of the street, we have serious concern that you may take a few steps and come to carry 4 amos in the street, which would be forbidden. So therefore we want to make sure that the rope you're going to use to control your goat is not going to fall off. So the Gemara wants to know what's about if the goat rope is looped through the beard, and the Gemara says, take it, we don't have an answer for that. Okay, now we go back to the discussion which we had earlier about if you use a restraint on an animal that is more than it needs, is that considered carrying? So the Gemara says we have a Mishnah that says a cow should not be walking in the public domain on Shabbos with a rope between its horns. So the Gemara is not sure what the purpose of this rope is. So the Gemara says that if the rope is there for an adornment, for decoration, it's like a colored ribbon, so that's for sure forbidden, because that doesn't serve a purpose, and cows aren't usually adorned, and therefore it's excessive, and the cow is carrying it. The question is, what if the rope is there to control the cow? So now cows don't really need to be controlled. They're docile, and if you just walk with them, they walk in front of you, you just tap it on the side and tell it which way you prefer that it goes. So if you put a rope on it, so that's really extra. So it's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. One says that if it's there to control the cow, it's extra and it's carrying. And the other says, no, you can still use it to control the cow, and therefore it's not extra and it's not carrying. The Gemara doesn't know which one's which. So Gemara tries to say, Rav Yosef says that probably Shmuel is the one who said that it's permitted to put a rope between the cow's horns for control. Why? Because we had a machlokes earlier between Hanania and the Tanakama in a Mishnah as to whether or not if you have excessive control that is called carrying, and Shmuel had said that the halacha is like Hanania that said that it's mutter. So probably here Shmuel is also the one that says that it's mutter to have a rope that you don't really need to give you extra control. So the Gemara says not so fast. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, not so fast. I have proof that Rav Yosef held that Shmuel is really the one who holds the other way. Shmuel is the one who holds that excessive control is carrying and it's forbidden. Because we had a discussion earlier yesterday on the daf where Rebbe's Talmidim asked him, what if you use the nose ring on a regular camel? The nose ring is not needed for a regular camel. It's easier to control a regular camel. The nose ring is usually only for a white female camel. So if you use the nose ring where it's not needed, so what's halacha there? So Shmuel had reported that Rebbe's Talmidim asked him that, and that one of the Talmidim who was the son of Rabbi Yossi, who was Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, brought a proof. He said that my father, Rabbi Yossi, said that animals can go out, that the following 4 animals are allowed to have a rope, and that's a horse, a mule, a camel, and a donkey. That would seem to say that these 4 can go out with a rope, but not a nose ring. So the Gemara therefore was saying that a nose ring is too much restraint for a camel, and therefore it should be forbidden. So Shmuel, who quoted that whole episode, seems like he holds that too much restraint is forbidden. So then in this discussion here about the cow with the rope between the horns, and whether or not it's carrying for the cow to have the rope, because the cow doesn't need the rope to be controlled, probably Shmuel then is the one who says that you do not need it, and therefore it's carrying. We have a contradiction in Shmuel then. What does Shmuel actually hold? So Gemara says, so we'll accept the latter one, and we'll knock out the first one. So Gemara says, well, why do you do that? Why don't you accept the first one and then knock out the latter one? So Gemara says, because I have another quote as to what exactly is the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about the cow, and here we have it stated clearly who holds what. Rav Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav that it's forbidden to control a cow with a rope on Shabbos because it's not needed and it's carrying. And Rav Chia bar Avin said in the name of Shmuel that it is permitted. So you see that Shmuel is the one who holds that it is permitted to control a cow even if you don't need it. Even if you don't need the rope, it's mutter. So now the Gemara has a kasha on Rav. The kasha is from para aduma. Now a para aduma is a cow which was used to make special water that could purify people from tumas meis. Paraduma was extremely valuable, and the paraduma could not work. It was not allowed to carry anything, even not on Shabbos. If the paraduma did any work whatsoever, it wasn't validated. So we have a brisa that says that you're allowed to lead a paraduma tied by a rope. So Gemara asks, now according to Rav, that's excessive. A cow doesn't need a rope. So the paraduma then is doing work. It's carrying the rope because it doesn't need the rope to be controlled. And if a paraduma that does work is invalidated. So according to Rav, this paraduma should become puzzle if you lead it with a rope. So how could this brisa say you're allowed to lead a paraduma with a rope? It proves that Rav's wrong. It proves that carrying a rope that you don't necessarily need is not forbidden. It's not considered to be work. It's not considered to be carrying. It's okay if you have an extra control. And therefore Rav is wrong. It says that it's carrying. So the Gemara says, no, I can defend Rav. There are 3 Amoraim who offer defense for Rav, and they say, no, really Rav is right. Really a rope is not needed and it's work. But in the case of the paraduma, it is needed. Why? 3 reasons. Abaye says, because the paraduma is traveling from city to city. A cow needs to be controlled when it's leaving its hometown. It likes to go back to rest at home, and therefore you need to force it to go. Rava says, a paraduma is extremely expensive. You don't want to just let it walk in front of you. You want to have a rope so that you have a hold on it. And Ravina says here we're referring specifically to a cow which was rebellious. It was hard to control, and you needed the rope. The Gemara now moves on to discuss the next phrase in the Mishnah, which discusses animals that are generally wearing a collar, such as cats, horses, and dogs, things like that. And the Mishnah's phrase was that they can be yotzim nimshachim, meaning that they can go out and they can be pulled by their collar. Now this collar was wrapped around the neck and there was a ring set on the collar and there was generally a leash clipped to the ring. So Gemara wants to know, what does this mean, yotzim nimshachim, going out and be pulled? What is that? Gemara has a machlokes. Rav Huna says there are two separate things. They can go out just carrying the collar and the leash, even with the leash wrapped around the neck, because it's an adornment and it's a normal classic adornment that these animals would wear, and therefore it's not carrying at all. According to Shmuel, however, these are meant to be one thing. It's yotzim nimshachim. They can go out pulled, meaning the only way that they're permitted to wear these collars and these leashes is if they're being pulled by it, if these animals are being controlled by them. But just to wear it as an adornment is not allowed. Okay, now the Gemara says that there's a brisa that fits with Shmuel. The brisa says that these animals are allowed to wear the leash wrapped around their necks as long as there's enough space between the leash and the neck, between the wrapping and the neck, to be able to grab it. Or as long as the leash is hanging, there's enough lead hanging from the leash that you can use it to grab the animal by, which clearly says that the animal has to be controlled by the leash. It's not enough for it to be just wearing it as an adornment, but it's not serving to control the animal. The Gemara, however, says that Rav Huna did according to his halacha. The Gemara says that Rav Yosef says that Rav Huna's household, the calves would go around with the halters on and the ropes wrapped around their necks. So you see that Rav Huna did it in accordance with his halacha, that he allowed the animals to just be wearing the rope and the collar and the leash and the lead, even though they're not being used to control the animal. Now, the Rishonim discuss how Rav Huna could do that if there's a brisa against him, and how Rav Huna understands the brisa as to not be contradicting him. Okay, now the Gemara discusses a mule. So there's a couple of issues here. First of all, what type of device controls a mule? A rope, a collar, a halter, what controls a mule? You have to know, because you have to use the right one, otherwise it'll be carrying. The next question would be, if you know what type controls it, does it have to be wearing it in a manner that you can pull it by? Or is it enough if it's just wearing it as an adornment? So Gemara has three statements about mules. One we saw earlier, we quoted it earlier on the daf and yesterday on the daf, where Rebbe was asked what type of device controls what kind of animal, and Rav Yosi, son of Rabbi Shmuel, son of Rabbi Yosi, quoted to him that a horse, a mule, a camel, and a chamar, a donkey, can use a halter. So you see there that it says that a mule can use a halter. That's how you control mules, with a halter. Now we have two additional statements on the subject. Both of them are quoting Rav Chanina, quoting Rebbe. So one, you have Rav Dimi, came from Eretz Yisrael. He said Rav Chanina said that Rebbe's mules would wear halters on Shabbos. Okay, it doesn't seem to add anything to the first one. And then the Gemara asks, well, were they wrapped or were they pulled? So Gemara says that Shmuel Bar Yehuda came and he said that Rebbe's mules, that Rabbi Chanina said that Rebbe's mules used to go around with the halters wrapped around the necks. So again, our three statements are, one was the earlier one, which said that mules are controlled by halters. Then we have Rav Dimi, who said that Rebbe's mules wore halters. And then we have Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, who said that Rebbe's mules wore the horses wrapped. Rebbe's mules wore the halters wrapped. So Gemara now says, they said this over before Rav Asi, and Rav Asi said, we don't need the last statement of Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda that the halters were wrapped. Although it's a bigger chiddush, but that's obviously what Rav Dimi meant, because if Rav Dimi wasn't saying that they were wrapped, so what would he be adding to the statement before, which was Rav Yosi saying the name of Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel saying the name of Rav Yosi, his father, that they were allowed to wear halters. So since we have that first statement, the second statement must be saying that it's wrapped, in which case the third statement, which explicitly says that they wore the halters wrapped, is not needed at all. So he says, no, you need all three. The first statement doesn't really help us, because the first statement just says that Rabbi Shmuel, by Rabbi Yosi, said this in front of Rabbi. We don't know if Rabbi accepted it or not. So that doesn't help us at all. We need Rav Dimi's quote, that he says that Rav Chanina said that Rebbe's mules used to wear halters on Shabbos. That tells us that a halter is an appropriate restraint, and therefore it's not carrying. And then you have to have Shmuel Bar Yehuda come and add that it's even enough if it's just wrapped, so he's not actually holding it or controlling it by it. That would be giving us a very necessary halacha. The Gemara now moves to the next phrase in the Mishnah, which it said that you're allowed to sprinkle paraduma water on these collars or put them in the mikvah while the animal is wearing them. This clearly indicates that these things can become tameh. Now the rule is that that the only things that can become tameh are items that are functional and serve a purpose. So these include, the Gemara says, based on a brisa, rings that a person wears, because a person's rings are functional. They are serving as a adornment. They are jewelry. However, rings of animals or kalim, these things don't really serve a function. You can't be an adornment to an animal. You can't be an adornment to an object. So that says that rings and collars and things like that serve animals aren't considered functional objects, and therefore they should not become tameh in the first place. So what's our Mishnah talking about when it says that these collars can be purified from their tumah? But how can they become tameh in the first place? They're not functional objects. Somebody gives two answers. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha says it's talking about where they used to be serving a person. It was a collar or a ring that a person used, and it became tameh that way. And then it was transferred to an animal, so it still has the tameh that it got when it was serving a person. Rav Yosef says no, because a person uses the ring or the collar to control the animal, it's therefore counted as an object which is functional to a person. That's the functional to the animal. There's also a brisa that says that a staff of metal, which you use to control an animal, is mekabel tumah because it's a functional object. You use it to control the animal. So this too is used to control the animal. It's therefore functional and it can be mekabel tumah. The Gemara now asks, but how could it be that you could put this collar in the mikvah while it is on the animal's neck? The ring that is set in the collar is attached so firmly that the water can't get between the ring and the collar, and we know that if the water doesn't get everywhere, the tefillah is not valid. The water has to get between the ring and the collar because they're considered to be separate things. They're sometimes used independently. So the Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara says, first of all, Rav Ami says it could be that the guy hammered the ring so that it became loose, it became stretched and broadened, and then it's loose where it's fixed to the collar. So now the Gemara says, hold on a second. We had a machlokas before how this thing became tameh in the first place. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha said that it became tameh because it used to belong to a person, and it was a person's usage. It was an object serving a person, and then it became tameh, and then it was transferred to an animal. But if that's true, that it was hammered in order to make it useful for the mikvah, so then the tumah is gone. Because the halacha is, whenever you do a physical change on a tameh object, that the tumah disappears, right? The tumah only attaches itself to a functional, finished object. If you do a physical change and now you change the object so that its previous state was not fully functional, then the tumah that was on it in its previous state doesn't stick around because it was only sticking on its previous version. Now that you've changed it to a different type, to a separate kli, a different type of a function, the previous tumah doesn't last. So then this wouldn't make sense. According to Yitzchak Nafcha, the only way that it was tameh as an animal's collar and an animal's ring is because it used to belong to a person. And now you're trying to put it in the mikvah to get the tumah off, but the tumah couldn't be there anymore because the only way that you could put it in the mikvah is if you hammered it out. If you hammered it out, the tumah disappears right then. So this would only fit with Rav Yosef's pshat that animal collars are innately mekabel tumah because they are useful for people to lead the animals. Somewhere says not necessarily. It could be that this really fits with Rav Yitzchak, and the tumah didn't disappear when you hammered out the ring, because Rav Ami here holds like Rav Yehuda. Who's Rav Yehuda? Rav Yehuda holds that an object that you change doesn't lose its tumah unless you're destroying the object. If you make it worse, then you're starting to break the object. That's when the tumah flies off it. But here, you're making it improved, you're making it more functional. In a case like that, the tumah does not disappear, the tumah sticks on, and that's why you could put it in the mikvah to take the tumah off. I have a second answer for how there's no problem of the water not being able to fit between the ring and the collar. That it's the type of collar that's made with a wide hole for the ring, and therefore there's plenty of space. Now, the Gemara quotes a brisa that says this. Now, we did not originally want to use this answer because it's rare to have collars made in that fashion. The Gemara now presents two parallel discussions, one about rings, which is what we were discussing up till now, and another one about needles. So the Gemara quotes a brisa which says as follows. A student from the Galil Ha'elyon, the upper Galil, asked Rabbi Eliezer, he said, I heard that there's a difference between two types of rings, and I don't know what the difference is. Do you know? So Rabbi Eliezer said, the only time that there's a distinction between rings is in regards to Hilchos Shabbos. That is, a woman's allowed to wear a ring in Rosh Hashanah midaraisa. It's not considered carrying, as long as it doesn't have a signet on it. If it has a signet, then it's not jewelry, and she can't wear it. That's the only time you have a difference between rings. As far as Hilchos Tumah, as to when one ring is functional and therefore it's considered a complete kli and it's mekabel tumah, that's the same for all rings. There's no difference between rings as far as Hilchos Tumah are concerned. You will not find any distinction between them. The Gemara says, first of all, it's not true. There's a Mishnah which clearly says that there's a difference between a ring that a person uses and a ring that's set into an animal's collar or into a kli, like we said before. A ring that a person uses can become tamei. A ring of an animal or kli cannot become tamei. The Gemara says, no, we were only talking about rings of people. The Gemara says, but in rings of people, there is a difference. There's the ring that somebody wears on his finger can become tamei, but the ring that you use on the belt as the buckle of the belt, that cannot become tamei, as well as the ring that you put on your sleeves to hold the sleeves up near the shoulder, that can also not become tamei. So the says, no, we're talking about finger rings. We're not talking about other kinds of rings. The says, but there's a difference between finger rings. There's a finger ring that's made out of metal and a finger ring that's made out of wood. If it's made out of metal, it can become tamei. If it's made out of wood, it cannot become tamei. The Gemara adds that the signet is made out of coral, which is a design that they had. But wood cannot become tamei unless it has a bowl shape of some sort that can hold things. So a ring doesn't have that. It can only become tamei if it's made out of metal. So the Gemara says, no, we were talking about metal rings. Okay, now the Gemara says some more discussion about needles. The Gemara says that the student asked Rabbi Eliezer, I heard that there's a difference between needles, and I don't know what it is. So Rabbi Eliezer says there's only a difference in Hilchos Shabbos. Now the word needle could refer to a pin, which is straight, or a needle, which has an eye. It has a hole they can use to thread. So Rabbi Eliezer said the only difference between needles is in regards to Hilchos Shabbos. That if you wear a sewing needle with an eye stuck into your clothing, so that's carrying, and you are violating an Isser D'Oraisa. If you wear a pin, so that would not be an Isser D'Oraisa because that's for design. So Gemara says, is that true? Is it true? Rabbi Eliezer said that the only difference between needles is in Hilchos Shabbos. I'll show you a difference in Hilchos Tumah. It says that a needle who had the eye snapped off or the point snapped off is no longer functional, and therefore it's not mekabel tumah anymore. Which says, no, we were talking about functional whole needles. We weren't talking about broken needles. Says, but even that's not true because you could have a whole needle, but if it's rusty, so then it's not functional anymore, and it's not mekabel tumah. The Gemara adds that's as long as it's so rusty that you can't sew with it, and even then, even if you could sew with it, it's only if you could still see the shape of the needle. So Gemara says, no, we weren't talking about rusty needles. We were talking about functional, polished needles. So Gemara says, well, there's a brisa that has a difference. The difference is whether it has the eye or not. If it has an eye, it is mekabel tumah. If it doesn't have an eye, then it's not mekabel tumah. So Gemara says, no, that's only where you intended to make an eye, and it's incomplete. But we were only talking about complete ones, either a needle that has an eye and it's complete, or a pin that doesn't have an eye, but you're not intending to make an eye, so it is complete already. So that within complete, non-rusty, polished, fully non-broken needles, there is no difference as far as Hilchos Tumah is concerned.